Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
You know, one thing that I really like about big cities is the street performers. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to, like, Boston or New York or Chicago, but there are street performers that are pretty much all over the place. New York City is probably most well known for their street performers. They have the naked cowboy, who actually isn't naked, and as far as I know, he's not actually a cowboy, but he does wear a cowboy hat, and he stands out there in his tidy whities and plays his guitar and sings for passers-by, poses for photos, and, well, he's even got some, celebrity endorsement sort of contracts. He's one of these people that's famous for being famous. Well, if the City Council of New York and the Mayor of New York have their way, then the naked cowboy, the women in body paint, and, well, apparently there are also Elmo impersonators. Yes, I said Elmo. Hee Elmo, what an impersonator. Ha And other costumed characters who populate Times Square would have to be in designated work zones under a new plan to manage what is seen as a surge of street performers in the famed Manhattan Crossroads. The story here comes from Reuters, and they report that Mayor Bill de Blasio voiced qualified support for the proposal, which was released on Thursday by a business group and is a response to the increasing criticism of the performers from officials. De Blasio and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo have called the performers aggressive solicitors who threaten to drag Times Square back to the bad old days when the area was a tawdry magnet for prostitutes, drug dealers, and panhandlers. And, well, depending on the quality of prostitutes, the quality of drugs that are being dealt, then, it might be a bit of an improvement. Because it could really be said that, and I don't necessarily want to, derail this too much, but it could be said that the naked cowboy and some of these other people that are street performers are basically panhandlers. Now, they're out there, and instead of just saying, give me money, at least they're, providing entertainment while saying, give me money, or they might not even actually say, give me money, but they have something, set aside for tips, and they're performing, and, well, if you see some guy in the subway playing a guitar and his guitar case is open, you toss him $1, toss him some quarters, whatever. He's there as a panhandler, but he's providing entertainment in sort of the hopes that people will give him money. Tim Tompkins, president of area business group Times Square Alliance, which wrote the report, said Times Square should be a place of freedom of expression, freedom of movement, and creativity without being a free-for-all. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Tompkins, but you can't have free expression and free movement while also regulating things. If you begin regulating what people are allowed to express, it's no longer free expression. If you begin regulating how people can move around, it's no longer free movement. And if you start regulating the way people have creativity, well, it's no longer the freedom to create. It becomes some sort of thing of you can only do what we have allowed you to do. And, well, that is antithetical to freedom, Mr. Tompkins. The article here continues. The performers, including topless women in body paint known as denudas and dozens of costumed mascots, have multiplied in recent years, posing for pictures with tourists, often in return for tips. Again, I have no problem with this. Again, it's essentially panhandling, but you're providing an entertainment value in return for whatever tips or payment you receive. The article here continues. It says, but alleged incidents of harassment of tourists and violence has led to stepped-up scrutiny from police and demands from some critics for a crackdown. In one case, a man dressed as Spider-Man was accused of punching a police officer after demanding a tip from a tourist last year. Okay, now we're talking about assault. It is already wrong to assault people. You don't need to say, oh, well, you can go out and perform, and there's a term for it. I forget what busking, I believe, is the hobo term for, like playing in hopes that people give you money. Like, doing some sort of performance in hopes that people give you money, I believe is called busking. So, it's okay to be a busker as long as you're in this designated area that we tell you, because somebody dressed as Spider-Man punched a police officer, so now we have to put you in little boxes. Well, if Spider-Man is in a little box, he could still theoretically punch somebody, and that would still equally be wrong. So it seems as though they're trying to handle this in the completely wrong way. Instead of, arresting the guy that assaulted someone, they're saying, okay, now everybody go stand in a box. The article here continues. The controversy intensified in recent weeks as the city's tabloids drew increasing attention to the denudas. De Blasio and Cuomo say the topless women will scare away families and reverse a transformation of Times Square in recent years in a tourist mecca. Now, I have not seen pictures of the denudas, but I have seen pictures of women in body paint. And I would say that based on what I've seen, some of the people in body paint are actually more covered and probably done in a lot more of a classy manner than some of the women that are wearing what are supposed to be clothes. I have absolutely no problem with the naked female body being covered in paint. I have no problem with the naked female body not being covered in paint either. But the claim here that, well, women in body paint are going to scare away families. Well, yeah, women in yoga pants don't really leave a lot to the imagination either. What's your point? The precise location, the article says, of the designated activity zones envisioned under the proposal was not immediately clear, nor was the proposed size. So it could be a thing to where the city winds up debating and discussing and voting on having these work zones that are approximately 1 square inch by 1 square inch, which would mean nobody could be out there performing because the box is too small. But we don't know what they're going to be voting on because, well, the proposal has not yet actually been made. Or it's been thrown out there, it's just not been written to the full extent. There's more on this when we come back.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Before I get back into the grifters slash busters slash we want to put you in a box people, I want to make sure that I tell you about something that will not put you in a box. That something is Bitcoin. Specifically, I want to tell you where you can use your Bitcoin. Assuming that, after all, you advocate free market money and you have Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a good alternative to the fiat-centric world that we live in. If you like Bitcoin, you like the free market, then you need Spend-A-Bit in your arsenal. Spend-A-Bit is the search engine for things you can buy with Bitcoin. Spend-A-Bit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend a bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin-accepting merchant, ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. spendabit.fppradio.com. That's spendabit.fppradio.com. So the article here from Reuters continues. It says, in addition to the designated activity zones of an unknown size and also unknown number, the city would carve out separate flow zones for pedestrians and civic zones for staging performances and other public events. Tompkins, a member of the de Blasio Times Square Task Force, unveiled the plan at a meeting on Thursday. The task force, which includes elected officials and area business owners, will present a comprehensive strategy to the mayor by October 1st. Now, I'm guessing that the Times Square Task Force does not have any street performers on that task force because, well, how dare you get input from the people whose lives you are trying to regulate? Like, why in the world would you do that? We can't get input from these people. We're trying to control them. So, no, it's elected officials and business owners, and none of the people whose lives we are trying to regulate get a say in what we're doing, unless they wind up coming to the city council meeting where they will probably not be listened to by the city council, and the city council will pass this anyway. Hopefully not, but more than likely it will happen. After the meeting, Mayor de Blasio indicated that he would support the zoning plan outlined on Thursday, telling a CBS News affiliate, "It's a great idea if we can figure out how to do it." Now, something that people have been trying to figure out how to do for a long time, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, is drug testing. And now, I'm not an advocate for drug testing of most people. Now, I would say that, under certain circumstances, drug testing makes sense. And the story that I'm about to get into is one of the few situations to where I think drug testing does make sense. Now, I don't agree with the outcome as it has been handed down to one of the two people involved in this situation. Now, before I get into the story, and I'm intentionally beating around the bush here because I do want people to be interested in this, because it's something that definitely interests me, and it's something that a lot of libertarians don't pay any attention to at all. And they probably will not even pay attention to this had I not brought it up. And this is specifically about two UFC fighters. UFC is the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And, well, both fighters, Nick Diaz and Anderson Silva, had a fight back in January. They fought one another, and they've both had positive drug tests. One of these two men had exactly one test that was positive. The other had exactly one test that was negative. The person who had one drug test that was negative is using that to prove that the other two samples, well, those were flaws, because this test came back negative, so therefore the two positive tests should be thrown out. The man that had one positive test has been suspended for 5 years by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Let me first tell you about the man who was suspended for 5 years, and then I will tell you about the man who should be suspended from the sport, but who thus far has avoided penalty. The Nevada State Athletic Commission finally had enough of Nick Diaz, reports MMAfighting.com. In a shocking decision, the Nevada Commission voted on Monday to levy an unprecedented 5-year suspension on the outspoken UFC contender, stemming from a failed post-fight drug test on January 31st at UFC 183. The suspension, retroactive to fight night, was passed unanimously at a hearing in Las Vegas. Diaz was also fined $150,000, which equates to 1/3 of the total amount that he wound up earning for the fight. The story here from MMAfighting.com continues. It says the Nevada commissioners pointed to Diaz's status as a repeat offender when discussing the severity of the punishment. Diaz tested positive for cannabis in Nevada in both 2007 and 2012. One of the commissioners, Pat Lundeval, said, "We had an athlete that came before us in 2007 and promised, 'I'm not going to do this ever again.' Then we saw him again in 2012, and we know that he failed to show for a drug test in 2009. We're now in 2015, and it doesn't appear that any of those proceedings have had an impact on the athlete, and it doesn't appear that the athlete is afforded the respect that this commission and the opportunity and privilege for him to fight in the state then affords." Under the proposed amendments to the NAC drug code, that's the Nevada Athletic Commission drug code, which goes into effect later this year, and were not valid at the time of Diaz's fight, a third-time positive test for cannabis would constitute a 3-year suspension. Diaz's attorney, Lucas Middlebrook, informed reporters following the hearing that Diaz does plan to appeal the commission's decision, referring to the judgment as a vendetta suspension. Diaz, who is 32, submitted 3 urine samples on the night of January 31st, one prior to his fight against Anderson Silva. That test was administered at 7:12 p.m., and in the 2 hours after the fight, he had another 2 drug tests, one at 10:38 p.m. and the other at 11:55 p.m. Of the 3 samples, the first and third were administered under the World Anti-Doping Agency protocol and submitted to testing to the WADA-accredited Sports Medicine Research and Testing Laboratory in Salt Lake City, Utah. Both came back negative. I'll tell you about the third test in just a moment.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So before I tell you about the single test that came back positive in the Nick Diaz urine sample post-fight drug test from January 31st, I want to make sure that I tell you about Liberty.me. Liberty.me is more than just a social networking website. Certainly there is the social networking aspect where you can post statuses, you can have friends, you can join groups. There are forums that is something you don't see in normal social networking. There are also chat rooms, there are ebooks that can be downloaded, and there is so much more at Liberty.me. And one thing that you will not find at Liberty.me, or at least something that I have not yet found, and I'm glad I've not yet found, internet trolls. And that's because at Liberty.me, it's a paid service. Internet trolls generally don't want to pay to be an internet troll. They want to go be internet trolls where it's free. Liberty.me is a paid service, and if you use referral code FPP Radio when signing up, you save 10% off your monthly fee. Liberty.me, referral code FPP Radio. So Nick Diaz had 3 urine tests on the night of his fight, January 31st. The first and third urine sample were tested by the World Anti-Doping Agency. Those tests came back clean. The urine test that was the second urine test or urine sample he gave, what they refer to as the B sample, first sample being A, second being B, third being C. The B sample was taken at 10:38 p.m. However, that was not administered by the World Anti-Doping Agency or a World Anti-Doping Agency accredited lab. It was handled by Quest Diagnostics. And the article specifies that they are not WADA accredited. The test came back over the threshold for allowable cannabis metabolites, resulting in the lone positive test. The B sample for the Quest result was never requested for testing. Or I'm guessing he gave 2 samples to Quest and they never tested the backup sample there. Diaz's defense, led by Middlebrook, argued the existence of 2 negative tests taken within the span of a few hours, conducted under WADA protocol, cast the Quest result as a scientifically unreliable and inexplicable outlier. Middlebrook says that there is simply no medically plausible explanation for the Quest result of 733 nanograms per milliliter, none whatsoever. Yet, in arbitrary and capricious fashion, this commission has filed a disciplinary complaint against Mr. Diaz in a situation where 2 test results from a WADA-approved lab produced negative results. negative results that bookend the erroneous result within a matter of hours, yet the complaint makes absolutely no mention of those two negative tests. So here we have a man who had 3 urine tests in the same night. One came back positive for cannabis. The other 2 came back negative. The 2 that came back negative included a test before and after the one that came back positive, meaning that there's no way that he smoked up and then peed and then, no wonder there's cannabis in the urine. Now, the man he was fighting, Anderson Silva, has thus far avoided any penalty despite having a negative test. The story here from MMAmania.com says former UFC middleweight champion Anderson Silva continues to successfully postpone his disciplinary hearing from the Nevada State Athletic Commission despite failing his UFC 183 drug test. And at the time this article was written, it says over 4 months ago. It's now been nearly 9. Veteran MMA reporter and drug testing expert Larry Pepe brings word that Silva's test results collected during the UFC 183 event, which took place January 31st, contradict one another. The samples sent to the Sports Medicine Research and Testing Laboratory returned positive. However, Quest Labs reported just the opposite. So in this case, you have a man testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs, steroids, if you will. One test came back negative, no drugs. 2 tests came back positive. This man thus far has not been suspended, but the guy who had 1 out of his 3 tests come back for cannabis is now out of a job for the next 5 years. Tell me if that makes any sense to you whatsoever. And now start to think, especially if you're one of the people who advocates for drug testing of people receiving any government subsidy. And some people will say any government subsidy. So whether you are getting unemployment, if you're getting some form of welfare, and I don't know, most of the people that advocate for this, they don't include the corporate benefactors. So, for instance, Ted Turner receives millions upon millions of dollars of corporate welfare through farm subsidies. Do the people that advocate for drug testing of welfare recipients think that Ted Turner should wind up getting a drug test before he can get his farm subsidies? And what about the small mom and pop farms that qualify for this? Should the guy that owns a farm be tested for cannabis? What if the guy lives in Colorado or Oregon or Washington, where it's perfectly legal to buy, sell, and consume cannabis? Should that person not get a farm subsidy because he smokes cannabis? Now, I don't think there should be farm subsidies at all. And here's my argument against drug testing of anybody getting money from the government. There is no probable cause. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution supposedly protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures. Where's the probable cause to test somebody for getting a government paycheck? Now, most of the time when I hear people advocate this, they say, well, I had to take a drug test. I had to go pee in a cup before I could have my job down at, whatever factory. Okay, well, yeah, but here's the difference. That's a private company saying, in order for us to employ you, you have to take this test. Now, there is no government requirement that you pee in a cup before you are allowed to do work. There is no government requirement at all. So people like to conflate the private sector requirement with a public sector requirement and somehow say that it's the exact same thing when, in point of fact, it's 2 totally different things. Now, if you think that Nick Diaz should be prevented from doing his the line of work that he wants to do, which is being a professional fighter, and you think that he should be prevented from doing that because one of his 3 tests came back positive, but somehow the guy who actually had steroids in 2 of his 3 tests should not be punished. I want to hear from you. Send me an email, fppradio@fppradio.com. And as always, I answer your questions every Wednesday in that Ask Me Anything, AMA at fppradio.com.